We're now going to have our Q&A portion of the town hall, and feel free to make a brief statement if you would like, but not too long, because we have less than an hour to finish our town hall today. I'm going to start with, so we're going to have mics floating throughout the audience, and we're also going to read some of the questions. You see my colleagues over there waving, flapping their arms. And we're going to have questions also that you've written. So we're going to go back and forth, and our presenters are also going to be available to answer questions. So the first question is there anything being planned to address warehousing of rent-stabilized units? Ellen Davidson is champing at the bit to answer that question.
Sure. So just for folks to know, the term warehousing usually refers to when you have a rent-stabilized apartment and the landlord's not renting out all the apartments. It's bad, to be in an apartment with a lot of empty units. Also, it's a resource that's not being used, and that sucks. So one of the motivations that people thought that was causing landlords to hold these apartments off the market was that there was this loophole that was left after the big rent laws were passed in 2019. That was if the landlord could combine a rent-stabilized unit with a unit next door, they could set a first rent of like $10,000. Which you could understand why it would be worth it to do that. I'm happy to say that both the state legislature and DHCR closed that loophole in December. And so we think that which is great. So we think that some of the motivation for holding apartments empty will be addressed by that. There's also some city council bills. There's an end warehousing campaign that have worked with city council members to pass some bills that would allow, the bills haven't been passed, but that would allow people where there are conditions happening in your apartment because the apartment next door is empty, to allow them to have HPD get involved. But lastly, we can't just pass a law that says all landlords have to rent out apartments. I want to be real. And part of the reason I say that is that I spent the last couple of years defending the rent stabilization laws from landlords who are trying to take the case to the Supreme Court to end rent regulation. The Supreme Court last year had the opportunity to take 3 cases. They did not. There are 2 more outstanding. I think they will also not take those cases. But one of the concepts that the Supreme Court looks at is whether or not landlords are forced to rent out apartments. So we can't and so the fact that they are not helps keep our laws constitutional, which is bad. I'll acknowledge for those who are in buildings with warehoused apartments. But I think the Frankensteining, the city council legislation will be helpful. And as we learned from the new laws of fining people for not registering apartments, there were 200,000 apartments that disappeared from registration, and they passed a bill. I thought it was useless, between you and me. Sorry, I did. And then over 100,000 apartments got registered this summer because of that legislation. So sometimes, bills that do small things have huge effects.
What is the motivation on a landlord's part not to rent an apartment right now? Are they waiting? Are they holding out for something that we don't?
Look, asking me to get into the head of a landlord is
very
hard. Easy. I think some landlords are doing it because they're mad that they can't, deregulate units like they plan to. I think some landlords think that eventually the pendulum will swing back. And they'll be able to get great wealth from those apartments. And some landlords are just really bad business people. And they just can't figure out how to make things work.
Thank you. I don't know if Councilmember Brewer has anything to add.
No, I do think that the city council, all we can do, because most of it is on the state level, is to try to do data, which is also part of what we're trying to do, like how many are actually warehoused. And in addition, if there is a situation next door to you, this is Carlina Rivera, council member, and my bill to try to do that. So we wish we could do more because it would pass perhaps, but we are preempted by the state, which we look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Thank you, council member. Now we're going to take a question from the floor. Do we have someone with a mic and a question? Okay, Evan. There's a question?
How many conversions are occurring? Are rent-stabilized buildings continuing to be converted into condos?
Great question.
So maybe a planted question. It was so good.
Maybe. So actually, no, they are not. And part of the reason they are not is part of the historic 2019 Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act that passed raised the amount of people who have to agree to the conversion from 15% to 51%. And so that has really slowed down the conversions.
Okay, we're going to go from a question on a card. This is for Danielle, I think. Why are bicycles allowed to go through red lights? Even in front of the police, nothing is done. Also, bikes go against traffic, wrong way. This problem is getting worse, and the police seem not to be doing anything.
I can't speak for the NYPD today. I come here representing a group of people who are looking at ways to solve this problem, but I'll say they should not be running red lights. Perhaps the NYPD is avoiding that situation because they feel like then down the road nothing is happening if they're arresting people and it's not worth their time. So I think that what I can really say about it is that it needs to be a multi-layered solution so that we're seeing less of the red light running to begin with. I'll also mention that when we reopen for community court on September 25th, at Midtown Community Justice Center, we'll be getting all the summonses in Manhattan for reckless driving. So then we can be part of the solution because we have a really wonderful driver accountability program, and we'll be tailoring that to folks who are delivery drivers and micro-mobility cases. And so I'm hopeful that that can also help move the needle.
Thank you. And I think colleagues have pointed out that the penalty for a hit and run by someone who's bicycling is different and lower than a hit and run of somebody who's driving, say, an automobile. Do you think those should be leveled, those types of fines or penalties? Unclear.
Hard questions.
Hard question.
Yeah,
There is legislation to make those penalties the same. I mean, based on the assumption that a hit and run is such an egregious and unconscionable act. Yeah. Councilmember Brewer?
I just think what would really help would be the registration, your wonderful bill for e-bikes, because then right now, when we hear about hit and run, we cannot find the bicyclist who hit. And that's something that is a constant. So we really, I appreciate so much, but we really need that registration.
So as Councilmember Brewer alluded to, we have a bill in Albany I carry with Assemblymember Simone to require e-bikes for commercial purposes to be registered and actually have a license plate so we can take care of enforcement. Let's take a question from the floor.
Thank you very much for this town hall. My name's Cullen Oliver Johnson. I've lived on 76. Can you hear me all right? I'm trying to be calm. Thank you for your time, everybody. 76 between Central Park and Columbus since 1972. I became an advocate about bicycle safety in our city when a gentleman from Jersey City came out of Scaletta Restaurant on 77th Street from a family celebration in November of 1997, and a chirping chicken bite hit him in his tracks as he stood there talking to his friends after the celebration, and he died an hour later in the hospital. And that was 1997. And ladies and gentlemen, and wonderful members of the council here, it's gotten worse and worse. I just have to address what you're talking about, red lights. New York City laws address that when you're riding a bike on this, you don't ride a bike on the sidewalk. It's against the law. You got to get off and walk your bike. Number two, just like a car, if it's a red light, if you're on a bike, you got to stop for the red light. You don't go through it like a vehicle. Can you imagine if all the cars went through red lights? The bikes go through it all the time. Number three, the bike lanes are a joke. You have a bike lane going downtown, but the bike lanes are going uptown and downtown. And if you're an elderly person or a guy with a little bit of a physical issue like myself, my neighbors, everybody in this room, you got to look to the left and to the right and then to the left again to make sure you're not going to get hit going the wrong way. The other issue is very important. Very important issue here. The blue city bikes are the worst offenders right now in our city. And I'll tell you why. I was walking down my block on 76th Street about 3 weeks ago. Thank you for the time. It's very important, though. And a city bike, a guy riding down from Central Park West. I'm talking to my neighbor's security guy down in 54. I see him in the distance riding the bike. You got to get off the sidewalk. No, he keeps coming. You got to get off the sidewalk because it's against the law. Get out of my way, he says on the city bike. I said, sir, this is our block. Leave me alone. And he rides on, but I steps aside because I'm going up to the Arthur Avenue and have some Italian food with my girlfriend from Sweden, and I want to get my life suckered on that street. But that's the issue. Last point about the city bike. Mr. Risher, let me just get my glasses on. Mr. David Risher, graduate of Princeton and Harvard, and an ex, businessman, now owns the Lyft car services, and he also, his company, owns the City Bike. City Bike should have a brochure like all the detectives from the New York precincts that I've talked to of all the bike laws that I've just stated in black and white. So when you're riding a city bike or any people that ride bikes in the city of New York, these are our laws, obey our laws, don't come into our city trying to kill us. That's it. Get in touch with Mr. Risher and ask him. Get in touch with,
Thank you.
get the dialogue.
Thank you very much. Now, that's important information.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna be hearing that from more than just you, but that's our job here today. And here's a question on a card for the elected officials, particularly Gail Brewer and Brad Hoylman-Sigal. Air quality is a huge health problem in New York, and air pollution will kill 3,200 New Yorkers this year. Can you please commit to supporting the Citizens Air Complaint Program, which lets ordinary New Yorkers report illegal engine idling by trucks and buses? And two, will you oppose the new bill, Intro 941, that would kill this crucial program? I don't know, Gail, if you want to go first.
I know about 941. Is Robin here somewhere? Robin asked a question, I bet. Yes, see, I knew it was Robin. The issue, I know you're addressed to, Robin. The issue is it's a complicated bill, 941. I think there's hearing on September 18th. I urge anybody who's interested to come and testify. I know that Councilmember Gennaro, I spent an hour on the phone with them about this bill yesterday. So I think people should come and testify and make your views clear. But I am a big supporter of, like all of us, of clean air, and think that any way we can get there is a good thing.
Thank you, council member. I will say that I wrote a letter in support of the Citizen Air Complaint Program just on Friday. I think it went out, and as well as opposing Intro 941 respectfully to the City Council. Obviously, I'm a state official, but we do weigh in on each other's bills. Thank you, council member. Next question from the floor. Jake has one. If you could say your name and then ask your question or make your brief statement.
Michael Winston. I live on West 74th Street. This has to do with e-bikes, which is obviously a top issue here. And Priscilla's law in particular of Councilman Holden. My understanding, Mr. Siegel, is that your bill in the state requires registration of e-bikes, but it does not require, unless I misunderstood you before, you said it also required display of license numbers. on the bikes. Is that true? Is
Correct.
that-
Yep.
Okay, so why aren't you backing Priscilla's law, which also requires that, or is that part of Priscilla's law? Because, you know, the fact of the matter is that when these bikes go the wrong way, they're on sidewalks, they hit someone, they can easily, if the bike is just registered, it can disappear, and the fact that it's registered has no impact on catching that individual. Whereas if it has a license plate or a license displayed, then cameras can catch it, police can catch it, pedestrians can catch it and call in the number, and at least the person arguably could be found. So it's very important, and it's also, I'll have to say, is that it's also, you know, maybe the lack of, and it's also Councilwoman Brewer also, who I understand is not backing Priscilla's law, and you know, it also protects the migrant community to require that, because if they think that they're accountable, they're the ones that get into these accidents and are oftentimes injured, as well as the pedestrians. And if they think that they're at risk of getting caught, they will drive safer and they will slow down and be more conscious of what they're doing. And so I think that the license plate display is of crucial importance.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm a state senator, so I don't, you know, I'm not familiar with, I've heard about Priscilla's law. I don't know if the city council has the authority to mandate licensing at the city level.
I don't think they do. This is a discussion.
Yep.
The Department of Transportation says they don't, and that's why I have a resolution to support your bill. But I think that's the only way it's
Yep.
going to get done.
Thank you, thank you. So it's a matter of which entity, state or city, has authority. I think it's the state, that's why we're advancing our bill. Happy to look at the councilman's bill to see if our bill doesn't include what he wants to have accomplished. But I honestly haven't undertaken that analysis, but I've heard of it. Let's talk afterward. Thank you. A question on anti-Semitism. Marisa, how is New York State comparing to other jurisdictions in terms of anti-Semitic incidents since October 7th?
I mean, most American, well, not most American Jews, but about a third of American Jews live in New York State. So anti-Semitic instances are quite high here. But if you look at it from the perspective of colleges and universities, there are Jews in many colleges and universities outside of municipalities that have large populations of Jews. And those students have reported firsthand to not just AJC, but other institutions and organizations as well, that they are feeling very frightened and very isolated. And this is a situation that I think we have to do a lot better on when it comes to working collaboratively with law enforcement, with elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels, with education departments and with DEI departments in colleges and universities, as well as the administrations in general. It is a very, very insidious thing that is permeating in a very frightening way across educational institutions. And I'm grateful to be working collaboratively with many organizations across New York, specifically here in New York City. It's called the New York Education Initiative, and it's a collaboration between several organizations, including AJC, the Jewish Education Project, ADL, and JCRC, among others. And we are hoping to address this issue in a wide-ranging way across K-12 schools, whether they are public schools or independent and private institutions. But we need to hear from community members as well. This is, like I said before, a society-wide issue. It's a collaborative effort, and the problem is becoming greater and greater every year in New York City and across the state. But I think that there are many things that our legislators, including the senator, have enacted in the state legislature to address these issues, and they're working very collaboratively with organizations like AJC to continue to address this problem, the society-wide problem that anti-Semitism is.
Thank you. A question from the floor. If you could say your name and... Oh, mic isn't working? Okay.
Okay. Hi, my name's Ilan. We've heard a lot about wanting to make Upper West Side affordable, or the West Side in general affordable for people to rent. One of the largest expenses that we all see are things like insurance, property tax, utility bills that are all going up at crazy rates. What are we doing to make it affordable to be able to provide housing in New York so that we can lower rents and make everybody have a safe place to live?
Well, that is a really important question because we often hear about the creation of housing, but not about the creation of enough affordable housing. Ellen, what is your kind of overview on how we're doing in affordability?
Oh, sucky. So, I mean, look, I mean, part of the problem is that we've been relying on the private market to build affordable housing, and it's not necessarily their job, right? Right? Like, it's really, I think, the government's job to, like, the biggest source of affordable housing comes from low-income housing tax credits, which comes from the IRS, which doesn't subsidize operating costs, right? So they can't get to low enough levels of affordability because they don't give the housing developer any money to keep the cost, the prices low enough. And I think we need to actually fund affordability programs. The insurance question, because the insurance costs are out of control, I think that the state legislature, or maybe it's the feds, I'm not sure, really needs to look at what's going on with these insurance companies, because I know from affordable housing providers that I mean, the property tax thing, right? A lot of affordable housing providers have tax breaks, maybe not enough, but the insurance has just skyrocketed over the last couple of years, and it can't be that the insurance costs have gone up. I think, you know, there's some playing with the market and, you know, squeezing it. I think it's more than inflation. I mean, what I'm hearing is it's more than inflation, and I'd be really curious to know whether, I know there was some talk about looking about whether the state could do some more regulation of the insurance market, so developers and people who own property aren't being hit with these huge insurance costs, because part of the reason part of the reason we're not building in New York, there are lots of reasons, like we make it, but part of the reason is the insurance costs have gone through the roof, making it very hard to build, and so we need to get those under.
Do you have a position on City of Yes and its affordability or lack of affordability requirements?
As an individual, or as legal
As
aid
an individual.
Legal aid has no position. I have gone from, look, I don't think it has enough affordability, but it has a lot of things in it that I think are really important. I want to get rid of parking minimums. I think that we need to build more everywhere, and the fact that it targets communities that have done no building over the last, 20 years, I think is really important. And so I think that a lot of the zoning changes it's talking about are really important and need to happen. The one that the borough president was talking about, enabling the conversion of office buildings that were built after 1960, I forget when, and like doing something with all that empty real estate seems really smart. But I do think housing costs money. And I want to see the government putting more if they want affordability,
Absolutely.
you actually have to pay for it.
Absolutely.
It's not enough to say to the people who are doing these conversions, do a little bit of affordability, because all you get is a little bit of affordability and not actually reaching the people who really need it. So these programs are going to cost money, and they should cost money.
Thank you. Another question. Were you satisfied?
I didn't hear an answer on property tax, which the city council tells me is your job, but then your office tells me is their job.
I can't answer that question, sorry.
That's why it was a question to my elected representatives.
Fair enough. Well, you know, property taxes are an issue statewide because outside of New York City, they fund our school system. So there's always a lot of push to lower them. That's why the governor has, in the last two budgets, proposed cuts in property taxes, but there's a downside because it hurts our educational institutions. And, you know, obviously, and there's a question right here about that, to what extent at all they're asking, do I support charter schools? I believe that a fundamental role of government is to provide for public education. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to pay for that. But in some places of the state, property taxes are so onerous that it's actually driving people out of their communities. I do believe, though, that we need to exercise some sort of veto over local communities, particularly those outside of New York City, that are blocking the creation of housing in a way that has been linked to, you know, decades of racism and bias against certain communities, you know, moving into certain towns and villages across New York City. I also strongly support what Ellen just said about government's role in subsidizing housing directly. That's why I'm glad we got that $100 million plus for the new supportive housing program for over 100 units over at in West Chelsea at the Bayview Women's Correctional Facility. But that's a drop in the bucket. We need a reinvigorated direct subsidy in the spirit of Mitchell Lama that built so many amazing apartments, including Manhattan Plaza here on the west side, and limited equity co-ops like Penn South, also in our district in Chelsea. The governor has an opportunity to do that, and we have one location where we could get that done, and Councilmember Brewer, I think, has talked about that too, in and around the Penn Station neighborhood, where there's the potential for new affordable housing for a direct subsidy under the state of New York's watch. I'm hopeful that in our negotiations we can push the state toward that direction. And we also need to provide, for the first time, an actual dedicated revenue stream to our public housing, which does not exist at the moment. And we're only getting drips and drabs from the state of New York, and basically the federal government isn't giving us any money. So yeah, the state and the federal government and the city need to be directly involved in the creation of affordable housing. There's a market failure. We can't rely on the market solely to produce affordable housing. We've seen under 421A that it's just not enough.
I just want to add that I have a bill that's pending that says Ward's Island, not Randall's Island, but Ward's Island could be just like Roosevelt Island. It could be all Mitchell-Lama. It could be affordable, and we should be thinking about that. It's the last open land left in the borough of Manhattan.
Actually, before I stop, I do have a thought about property taxes, which is, look, in New York City, we have 3 million units of housing, and 2 million, 2/3, are renters, 1/3 is owners. And so, and most of them live in multifamily housing. And multifamily housing has higher property taxes than single-family homes and co-ops and condos. And that means, and I think that's wrong, right? Like, I think there's a tax fairness because, you know, certainly property owners of multifamily housing pay more taxes, but they also pass those taxes on to their tenants, which means, you know, some of the people who are less able to pay for the tax system are paying for the tax system. And so I do think that we have like some fundamental fairness, and it may be that our government thinks that we should reward homeowners and not renters, but in New York, renters are the backbones of the community, and I think that there should be some efforts to make taxes more fair.
Agreed.
There's a lawsuit on this, as you probably know. Martha Stark initiated.
Yep.
And it's still pending the outcome, and it's not moved at all, but it should.
Yeah. The Property Tax Commission that I guess it was under Mayor de Blasio and Speaker Johnson, produced a report. There's been no action on it at the city or state level. But, you know, I'm hopeful that we eventually will address the issue. It's just that I guess the political, you know, tectonic plates are such that the issue has not yet moved at either level of government. Another question from the floor? Yes.
Hey there, my name is Henry Burbank. Thank you all for making yourselves available for this town hall. I am a bicyclist, and I have had some close encounters during my time riding in the city, riding, legally in the bike lane, but, moving at a reasonably fast pace when pedestrians have walked out unexpectedly, when the lights have not been in favor of them, or, when they've been outside of a crosswalk. Most recently, this happened outside of the Little Island Park, where the Little Island entrance intersects with the West Side Highway bike path. And I'm curious, I want to ride responsibly. I don't want to hurt anybody. But I'm curious, especially in those areas of high traffic and high pedestrian, bicyclist, other recreational user interaction, what is the city doing to make it safer for everybody?
Well, I'll say that from my vantage point, again, state official here, I think, the creation of more bike lanes makes it safer for cyclists. Protected bike lanes are safer for cyclists. Literally outside of my office on 26th Street, the first city bike fatality occurred. A pretty young man named Dan Hanigbeg, who was 36 years old, was struck by a bus and died, left two young children. That was in 2018, I believe. Since then, there is a protected bike lane on 26th Street. Councilmember, any thoughts on what can make it safer?
No, I think that the city has a plan that has not been implemented, as you know, in terms of bike lanes and bus lanes. And so that plan has to be implemented. It's been pending for some time. But you were in a bike lane if you're at Little Island, so even that is challenging. I have friends who ride, and they're concerned because motorcycles and bikes that are not supposed to be in the bike lane are in the bike lane. But what you're also saying, pedestrians need to be more vigilant. And so there is a whole discussion. There's no discussion about this topic, I think. And I think we need more, I have to say, from the mayor or from the city council and from the state. The pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles, we all need to pay a lot more attention. And I take your word, I understand what you're saying.
And on 9th Avenue, there's even horses in the bike lane. That's
another whole topic with the horses.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic. But bike lanes should be for bikes only, but we have to make it certain that their bikes going the right direction, they stay in the lane and don't go on the sidewalks, for sure. Danielle, any thoughts on it?
No, I think the symposium brought forth some really solid ideas around street infrastructure that would be helpful to all of that, right? The issues of the pedestrians and the cyclists, as well as the micro-mobility.
Question from the floor. There's some. How about there?
Hi, I was wondering, my name is Mordechai. As a religious Jew, I was walking on Labor Day from 22nd Street to 34th Street, and I happened to walk, it was on 5th Avenue, I happened to walk, I had the option of 5th Avenue or Broadway, and I took Broadway. Only later that day I found out that there was an anti-Israel rally happening on 5th Avenue, and I can only think afterwards, and I keep thinking about this, what would have happened if I would have walked on 5th Avenue. I was wondering what your message is to me and to other religious Jews walking around with the kippah.
It's really heartbreaking to think that is a situation that you or anyone has to confront in their own city on their way home or on their way to school. It's outright unacceptable. Marisa, how often do you hear that?
Too often, and it's not just an issue that's happening in the city, as I said earlier. It's happening a lot on college campuses. I hear it from younger and younger folks all around the state, not just in New York City. And we want Jewish youth to be proud of who they are, but there is a real tangible fear that they are feeling, and that's why it's so important for this for combating and dismantling anti-Semitism to be a society-wide effort that we're all in together and working together, both at the grassroots and grass tops level. And I just want to make sure, I said this during my presentation, but to the gentleman in the audience and everyone, there are different ways that you can report anti-Semitism, whether it's to local or federal law enforcement, to your college administrators, and social media platforms. So we have a guide, and I encourage you to take a look at it and use it. It's gotten a lot worse since October 7th, unfortunately, and I don't know that we can be confident that it'll get better in the short term, but we're working really hard to dismantle anti-Semitism and combat it in a way that addresses anti-Semitism in the 21st century, where we're seeing it really disguised as anti-Israel animus.
How deep does it go in your mind? Like, nobody is born anti-Semitic or full of racism or homophobia or transphobia. Are we doing enough with civic education?
No. No, we are not. And it's difficult. I've heard, that it's, when it comes to whether it's the state education department or the New York State legislature, there is not such a symbiotic relationship there. But it's not just about legislation, it's about policy change, it's about including Jews in DEI initiatives, in ethnic studies initiatives and programs. That's an issue that we're seeing and that we've seen for years now in California. It will likely make its way to New York, but Jews need to be included in these education initiatives. Not enough people know about Jews. They think they know about Jews, especially in New York, because they feel like they see them everywhere. But Jews are a very diverse people, not just religiously, but culturally and ethnically. And the education systems really need to do a much better job, especially confronting extremism and conspiracy theories that are unfortunately hurting a lot of Jewish students right now.
Thank you. Quick question from the card. Why was congestion pricing halted, and will it get put back on track? Talk about street safety and safety for cyclists and pedestrians. Lawsuits, pressure from upstate and New Jersey, are those the reasons? I think those are part of the reasons. I'm happy to say that I intervened on the lawsuit in New Jersey by Governor Phil Murphy, who is suing New York State for our congestion pricing program. The case was assigned, believe it or not, to a judge whose wife was an appointee of Phil Murphy to the New York, New Jersey Port Authority. So I wrote an angry letter to the presiding judge and pointed out the conflict of interest. The presiding judge wrote an angry letter back to me and said, it's none of your business. But he did remove the judge, so who is recused, and now we have a better judge in that case. But I'm very hopeful that we'll get congestion pricing back on track. I say mend it, don't end it. We have $1 billion at stake. We have federal money at stake. We have a federal review at stake that took over 4 years. And we have over $600 million already, as I mentioned earlier, committed to the camera infrastructure that's ready to be turned on as soon as the governor gives her okay. I am hopeful. But we'll keep fighting. Question from the floor. Yes, Jake.
My name is Robert Koschel. Thank you for having this town hall and being here. I've lived on the Upper West Side and West Side for a total of 30 years. And I just have some thoughts about e-bike and safety issues around that for pedestrians and for the people who are riding e-bikes for recreational purposes, and also for people who are earning a living with e-bikes. I think that e-bikes may not be the right term for them anymore. They have a motor, so just like a gas motorbike, these are really electric motorbikes. And I think we would all be safer if they were regulated as motorbikes, with standardization for lighting, front and rear, for insurance requirements, which I think has come up before, and also for licensing, not just for the actual vehicle, but for the person who's riding it. And I'm not talking about making anything more difficult for people who are trying to earn a living with e-bikes, just to be safer for everybody. People earn a living driving a cab, they're licensed, insured. They earn a living driving Ubers, they're licensed, insured. People who are earning a living on an electric motorbike, considering how much the technology has changed since these were introduced, the ones that have throttles, where the pedals are really just simply a place to rest your feet, are electric motorbikes. Pedal assisted, sure, that's something separate. But if you're going to get on a motorbike in a public street, interact with cars and pedestrians, you should be licensed, insured, and have a level of education which would come along with licensure. You know, I don't think that we should sacrifice public safety for anybody who's trying to earn a living. Everybody should be able to earn a living, but balanced with public safety.
Thank you. I think that's well said. Danielle, any response?
You're absolutely right that of the mopeds versus the e-bikes has increased dramatically since the pandemic, when the demand for food delivery went up and folks were trying to get places faster. They started using more of the mopeds that go up to 30 miles an hour. And absolutely, and the bills that I discussed and that you discussed, Senator, and I think Assemblymember Rosenthal, would get at a lot of what you said around insurance, registration, and liability around driving a vehicle like that.
Thank you. Another question or comment from the floor? Do any of my colleagues have mics? I don't see them. Where? Okay, great.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Thank you for putting this town hall. To continue on the conversation of the motorbikes or e-bikes, I'm wondering what is happening or what you guys are doing about Riverside Park, because I go there a lot, and every time I go, there's a motorbike that is speeding through. And at one time, they passed right by me. And I also bike, and I try to follow the law, but it's a huge problem, as we are all talking about here. But I'm wondering what is being done. I called the police because this happened like 5 times in like a period of 2 weeks. And I called the police, and the guy just told me, oh, well, you don't know how many motorbikes or e-bikes I have here. We try to go once in a while, and somebody goes in there and parks their car there, and tries to stop them. And that was it. That was the response I got. So I'm wondering what's being done, because it's a problem in our streets and also like in the park where you go to, you're not paying attention as much, I think, as you will be on the street. And there's a lot of, people with kids and, so yes, that's my question.
Well, I think what we're talking about in terms of registering commercial e-bikes would go to that, hopefully address some of that problem. But we need enforcement as it stands now. And you've witnessed some of the enforcement, but it's sporadic, right? And it's not consistent or sufficient. So we can continue to press
I would
for
also,
greater enforcement.
I also think that the Parks Department needs more PEP officers, people who do actual enforcement, because what you're talking, I've seen that. Those are actual motorcycles in Riverside Park. So they are, quote unquote, either illegal or supposed to be licensed. It's not like an e-bike, which hasn't gotten to be passed a law to be licensed. They're actual motorcycles. And it's so they need to be arrested and off the streets. So it's enforcement, which is different than needing to be licensed. We're all writing letters, screaming and yelling. I've seen it myself. I know it's horrible. I am very aware of it.
We've been talking with colleagues about the need for camera enforcement of bikes, particularly motorbikes or motorcycles. You need licenses first, but the illegal bikes in Riverside Park the illegal motorcycles in Riverside Park, in theory, could be subject to enforcement by cameras. So I think the most neutral way to enforce our traffic laws is through speed cameras. So I've been a staunch supporter of more cameras on our streets in New York City. Thank you. Next question, yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot to everybody on the dais and everybody who is in the auditorium. I'm just have to get to what I see as clearly, and you just almost got there, Brad, but
Yeah.
I rode a bicycle here, and I do follow the laws. But just like, and I laud and applaud all of the work that all of you have done with legislation and laws and trying to do things like that. But the elephant in the room, standing on a thin blue line, is that the NYPD is not enforcing the laws. Just like the ordinances to not spit on the sidewalk and to curb your dog and to not feed the pigeons and to go 25 miles an hour or less, none of these laws are being enforced by the NYPD. I stood next to a cop on 8th Avenue who was there for a street fair, and we watched someone ride an illegal two-stroke motorcycle that did not have a license and cannot be licensed. He wasn't wearing a helmet. He was going about 40 miles an hour the wrong way on 8th Avenue, and he made a left-hand turn going the wrong way onto 51st Street and parked on the sidewalk, and I turned to the cop and said, "Aren't you going to do anything?" And he said, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "Your job." He said, "What do you expect me to do?" And I said, "Well, you could at least give him a warning, if not write anything." He said, "We're underfunded. We're not allowed to do anything." And then he went and got in his car. And the two of them sat in their car, and he wouldn't even talk to me about it. Ever since the bail reform law went in, it is impossible for me in Midtown to get an NYPD officer to do anything.
Thank you. Another question from or comment from the floor? Yes?
Yes, Gail Brewer, this may be something for you. I've lived.
She almost made it off the stage, folks.
I lived in a Mitchell-Lama for over 50 years. The last 6 years, every year we get a small increase amounting to over 30%. But because it's increase on top of increase, it's more like 40%. This year, we're told we are getting another 20% increase, which is like 60% over 7 years. That seems like a lot for a Mitchell-Lama.
Are you city or state Mitchell-Lama?
Pardon?
Are you a city or state Mitchell-Lama?
Got a tower. What is that? That's city, right? Okay. During COVID, we have 3 stores that were paying rent. Because they couldn't pay the rents, we had to subsidize them. When I told the managing agent they could get help, she answered me, if they don't want to get help, they don't have to. So I said, so why do I have to pay? Because they're not paying their fair share.
We could talk afterwards. Certainly, I know the 3 stores. I live around the corner, and generally, because you're co-op or rental, you're rental. Yeah, you're co-op, right? That's what I thought. So there's a little bit. It's up to the shareholders and the board. We know your board members to be able to negotiate and try to come up with some different ways of assessing you as shareholders. Because the rent isn't up; it's the maintenance that's up. So we should talk afterwards.
Thank you, council member. Now you may quickly. She's dashing off the stage. She has a busy day. Question from the cards. I know we have a lot of e-bike questions. This is about traffic too. There are still too many modified mufflers blasting their loudest in the neighborhood. This is especially true in the middle of the night. going down Fifth Avenue. Is there any enforcement? That seems to be a theme here. We can do to crack down on these rogue drivers. We already have the laws to prevent this, and that's absolutely true. We did pass a bill in Albany called the Sleep Act, and it prevents the sale of modified mufflers in the city of New York. My colleague Andrew Gennardis wrote it. I co-sponsored it. We're trying to get those mufflers from being sold, but it is, and it does come down to enforcement, and it is very difficult for NYPD to catch a rogue muffler in the act. But I'm open to ideas if people have thoughts. One is sound cameras, which that was passed in the city council, right? Okay. But we're going to try to get more sound cameras throughout the Upper West Side and the entire district. I think that's something we can all work on together. Let us know if you have an idea for a location. Another question? Yes, Jake.
Yes, I have submitted a card to you, and it's getting
Oh,
late.
you submitted a card. I'm
Yes,
sorry. Yep.
and I'm afraid we're not going to get to it, but my topic is on something we haven't talked about at all, and that is home care in New York State that's paid for by Medicaid. I'm an advocate. I help people to get Medicaid and home care, and as you probably know, they are all administered by privately run, managed long-term care plans who are doing an absolutely awful job, in giving people the hours of home care that they need. There are reasons for that. The state does not give the plans enough money to run the program the way they should be run. Anybody who needs more than 7 or 8 hours of home care a day, the plans are losing money. And rather than going to the state and saying, we can't do this, we need more assistance, they take the clients and they try to box them into as few hours as they can get away with. There are many advocates dealing with this, but I'm a frontline worker. I hear about and see the patients who are sitting there unable to change their wet diapers, unable to get out of their chairs, unable to get their meals. And if for those people who don't have an advocate to appeal that process, they wind up not getting what they need. And it's so rigid that, and I've done appeals for 9 years, and they're getting tougher and tougher, and we wind up going for a state fair hearing, and that everybody gets funneled into administrative law judges. There are clearly not enough judges to even address it. They are also diverting people to another program called the NHTD program, which is a waiver program. That's not what it's supposed to be for. So, in my opinion, there's a terrible logjam, and it boils down to people, thousands of people in New York State not getting adequate home care
Thank you.
and needing
No,
help.
thank you so much. I strongly support. There's legislation that Senator Gustavo Rivera, I think, introduced very recently around CDPAP reform to provide more funding. And there's an initiative in Albany around the whole home care shortage of both workers, because they're not being paid enough, and funding. And we really have to work together and press the governor in next year's budget to put more money toward home health care aides. It is God's work that you're doing, and I'm very grateful, as I'm sure the families of the loved ones who you support. Thank you. Another question from the floor. Come on, colleagues. Anyone over here? Who's Evan?
Hi, I'm talking about something we haven't spoken about. I want to know more about policies around the migrant families that sit on our streets with so many children, some of whom may be in school, may not, and I want to know if we're still doing, according to the mayor's plan, 60 days, and then they have to be uprooted which totally destroys the
Unconscionable.
It's
Absolutely
it's
unconscionable.
unconscionable, destroys any continuity in schools, any possibilities. I see these people every day. I'd like to know, how are they living, and
Yeah.
and what can we do about it? It's a disaster.
I share your heartache over seeing young children who should be in school selling candy on the subway. You see it almost every day. And I want to thank District 3 in particular. Let's give them a round of applause for organizing parents to support and provide an infrastructure and a network to provide support for these migrant families. Most of their support is coming at the school level and in an unofficial capacity because, frankly, City Hall has not been terribly sympathetic to their plight. I have legislation in Albany that I carry with Assemblymember Catalina Cruz to invalidate the mayor's 30 and 60-day eviction rule. Because, frankly, some children, and as I learned recently, last year, some kids, because they were evicted from the shelters because of the mayor's policy, one child moved to 4 different schools during the school year because they were moved around like widgets by DHS. So we have to stop that. They need stability. We have to put the resources. Albany needs to do its part. I asked the mayor, by the way, during the budget hearings up in Albany last year, Mr. Mayor, how much money do you need? He didn't have an answer. So there is truly a lack of, I guess, of clarification on the city's part as to what the state should be doing, but we need to support the mayor and provide more resources. I agree with that, but we also need to know how much they need and what they're doing with it, and they need to end this 30, 60-day eviction policy, in my humble opinion. Thank you. Another question, we're going to be wrapping up soon. Anyone down front, any of my colleagues down front, can you come over here, Jake? These folks didn't get a question answered.
Would it be possible to...
But you need a question answered? Okay, well then you're next. Okay?
Would it be possible to lower the decibel level on emergency vehicles, even just a little bit?
Yes, there are city council bills to that effect. I think Councilmember Brewer carries one. And we hear this complaint a lot. It's a state issue, but let's circle back around and see what we can do at the state level on that front. The city has been working on it. We hear you. We get a lot of calls about that very issue. I understand it as well where I live. I'm in an ambulance zone. I'll tell you something else that could help: congestion pricing to end the gridlock of traffic, and so that those ambulances don't have to pull their alarms as often and as loudly as they do. But yes. Yeah. I was with, one anecdote. I was with, I chanced upon a man who was having what I thought was a heart attack on 24th Street near Penn South. And I was with him and a number of other people as he was writhing in pain on the sidewalk. We couldn't do anything for him. It took the emergency personnel 37 minutes to arrive. And I called the other day. He's okay, but I think congestion pricing would hopefully ease some of that gridlock and also make our lives a little better by reducing the noise of emergency responders. But I hear you on that. Let's circle back around. Final question, sir. I think have we reached we're a little bit over.
Yeah, I know. That's why I ran over there to try to
Sorry
get a
about that.
microphone. All right,
And by the way, thank you for all of your questions. We're going to go through these and hopefully be able to put responses on our website. We really do appreciate all your good questions and comments.
Tommy McInnes. I live on 42nd Street on the west side between 8th and 9th. When I get out of the subway on 8th Avenue and I got to walk across the north side of the street, they got a shed and they got drug dealing going on in the shed. When I come in the subway station, even before I get up, sometimes there used to be a Dwayne Reed there, and there's a doorway. Sometimes you see folks sitting there just doing the drugs, smoking crack or pulling on the K2 on the joint, whatever. And it's a gauntlet that happens regularly when coming up this way. When I get out of the subway, I walk on the bus lane just so I don't got to walk in the scaffold. I mean, okay, I heard what DA Bragg said about homeless people, mental illness. Yeah, I get it. But the guy selling shouldn't have that same, concern, sympathy. I mean, what would it take to just get a Midtown North precinct to make that a post? Put someone there, and then the sale won't happen.
I think, I think that's not a bad suggestion. We often will relay problem, hotspots to the local police precinct. Daniel, do you have a thought on troubled spots and how, your institution might address some of them?
Sure. We're part of a coalition that the Garment District Alliance and the District Attorney's Office have brought together specifically around the 8th Avenue corridor and exactly the issues that you're talking about. We come together weekly to talk about those issues, and it's a multifold project. It has to do with the physical infrastructure that facilitates some of that, like scaffolding, but then also the law enforcement aspect too, and how to address folks who are engaging in those behaviors. They did a massive outreach effort with the navigators that DA Bragg talked about that work for an organization called The Bridge, and I believe they were able to get 39 people placed in emergency housing in a very short amount of time. I don't want to misquote, but like a month or two, which is pretty remarkable. So I can just say that there's a concerted effort with multiple agencies involved. The mayor's senior advisor on mental illnesses at those meetings. And we're, folks are trying to figure out how to move the needle. I hear you on the drug dealing, and that's certainly something that's discussed all the time. And maybe I'm happy to have further conversations, and maybe we can find ways to be part of that solution when the community court opens back up, because folks will be coming through our doors specifically who may be arrested on those types of charges.
Thank you, Danielle. And let us know, my team's here and me personally, that spot specifically. Okay, one more question. That's it. This is it. Final one. Okay, and they're going to kick us out. Okay.
Happening with buses, the connection from one bus to another. There are some streets where if you want to select bus, you have to walk. There's no connection, for example, between the M72, and I know it's the side you're going to say, and the 2nd Avenue bus select. You have to go to 67th Street to get.
That's the east side.
Okay,
I'm
but
joking.
on the west side, all right. How about why are bus stops left in the middle of the
Yeah.
sidewalk
You
now? They used to be at the ends.
Let
and
us know. That is something we deal with the MTA. Please, if she has a if there's a bus stop that you want moved, let us know.
Okay, and also, besides that, why aren't there stops that were moved during construction on the block?
Yeah, why have they been
Many
moved
of
back?
them have never been put
You
back.
know why? Because people have not, I think in many instances, complained about it.
I've called 311 about that a
Okay,
few times.
go to your elected official too. It's good to have the paper trail with 311, but go to your elected official, me and or your city elected officials. We can address those issues.
Okay, and there was one goal I remember years ago that
Yep.
we were supposed to have for buses in the subway system we have it, where you have the oncoming buses, the schedule listed. There are so few stops that have that. They never reach that goal. And also, why Link New York City was supposed to be free throughout the city.
Yeah.
It doesn't connect anywhere. And the MTA used to have free Wi-Fi on the buses, totally discontinued. What's going on with these
Okay,
things?
those are great questions, and we can follow up with those. Yeah, thank you. No, we need to press them just like we do other agencies and authorities. Yep. Absolutely. Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm glad we got to you. Thank you very much, everyone. Really enjoyed your questions and comments. Thank you to our presenters from the American Jewish Council, Legal Aid, and Midtown Community Justice Center. And thank you to my colleagues in elective office for spending some time with us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you so much.